Good morning, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, as Lynn said, I'm Sarah Golding, and I've recently taken over the role of President of the IPA. And essentially, it's my job to set the agenda for the advertising industry for the next 2 years. But given 2017 is the centenary of the IPA, I have rather ambitiously set out to put the industry on course for the next 100 years. I think I'll be long gone by then. But anyway, that is my objective and my ambition, and therefore my agenda is all about the magic and the machines. And this is a call to the whole advertising community to embrace the incredible opportunities that exist already and will only grow in the future, to bring together automation and creativity to make magic for our clients. Now, obviously, a key feature of this is data and evaluation, because the rise of digital has created an exponential growth in the volume and importance of data. So put simply, I'm very keen to help agencies to embrace data, to help them find the magic in the numbers. I mean, each day, as we all know, we face a veritable tsunami of data in our professional lives. But how do we really know if a data set is fit for purpose? How do we know it's been collected and calculated correctly? How do we know it's safe to base our decisions on? This morning is all about providing you with a basic toolkit and the key questions to ask to assess whether the data you are using is actually fit for purpose. This isn't just to ensure we use data to create better marketing and communications. It's also to ensure we don't let the misuse of data put our campaigns and our industry at risk of wasting our clients' money. The IPA and ISBA are lobbying particularly hard right now to ensure we all get access to independent and accountable audience data, because it's only through objective measurement that advertisers and agencies can feel certain that they're getting what they pay for and not associating with content that's inappropriate for their brand. I'm now going to hand over to Richard Marks of Research the Media, who's going to explain why we need accountable data and how we can go about getting it. Richard.
Good morning, and thanks for coming out on what apparently is going to be the hottest day of the year, but not at the moment, so it's nice and cool. So if the report that we've been working on is the screenplay, then I guess this is the big screen adaptation. And attempting a presentation of this kind is always tricky, particularly if you don't press the button on your microphone. There we go. Red, green. But attempting a presentation of this kind is always tricky, as we're talking concepts here. There are no results to chart creatively, no data to visualize, just me and an argument to make. Someone once described country music as 3 chords and the truth. Well, this is 30 charts and the truth. Now, I'm guessing that if you're in the room, you'll probably be more likely to agree with at least some of what I'm about to say. Party manifestos, it's that season, tend to be unveiled to a room of supporters, but they live and die on their appeal to the less engaged floating voters. So today, this presentation is really about how we win over the hearts and minds of those we need to persuade. What are the arguments that can effectively and convincingly encourage transparency and accountability in media data? Now, in the last few years, adult colouring books have become something of a phenomenon. By that I mean colouring books for adults, not colouring in adult content, although perhaps those do exist as well. I thought they provide a useful visual metaphor for how we use data. We have a broad idea, assumptions about the shape of our media plan, and then use data to add colour to our picture. But is the data we're using giving us the right palette of colours? Billions of pounds depend on us getting those colours correct. In this case, I was pretty close, but not in full colour. Fear not, this is not a metaphor I plan to labour to death for the next 25 minutes. The challenge is a huge one. The stakes are high, and what happens in the movies is that the good guys team up. And that's what the IPA and ISBA have done in this groundbreaking joint initiative. So here's a preview of the structure of the narrative for the next 25 minutes or so. I'm going to define some terms before we get started and also remind you why data matters. I'm going to examine the continued relevance of the JIC model in providing transparency and explain what a data provider needs to do to provide that transparency. We're going to trace a sequence of unfortunate issues with transparency in online data that have brought matters to a head recently. And we will look at the barriers to transparency in terms of what they've been and how they can be overcome. I'm going to end by outlining a 5-point plan, a call to action from the IPA and ISBA in order to head off that crisis of faith in media data. Now, one of the main concerns I had in preparing the report was that we get our terms and conditions, you can tell I've been reading contracts, terms and definitions correct. What data are we talking about, and what do we mean by transparency and accountability? So let's be clear from the start what we mean. Firstly, by survey research, I will mean specifically data gathered from a representative sample or cross-section of the market, measured passively with meters or software, or via respondent recall. Typically, this data is balanced and weighted to represent a market. Big data, in the media context, is detailed media usage data stored directly from servers, ISPs, mobile networks, and user databases. These data sets can be based on very large opt-in samples or a census count of the whole user base. I talked about how the two complement each other in the IPA's Big Opportunity Report, which we launched in this very room 3 years ago. I'm going to use the word transparency a lot, and precision is again essential. By transparency, we mean clarity in the collection and presentation of data that's used to make decisions in the buying and selling of media. We want media owners and online platforms to demonstrate clearly how data is being collected and verified, and to use definitions of media behaviour that are consistent and proven. Some online companies and media platforms use the word transparent to also mean directly linking behavioural data and purchase data, a transparent link between purchasing and media behaviour. However, that's not what I'm talking about here. By transparency, I mean the need to show how that data is gathered and reported in the first place. Transparency has also been used more recently with regard to an examination of media agency trading practices currently under investigation in the US, but again, that is definitely not what we're talking about here. And our third and final word in Dictionary Corner is objectivity. Has the data been produced in an impartial and an unbiased way? This can be through a JIC, in which interested parties on both the buying and selling side oversee the data, but it can also be achieved through the independent appraisal and verification of proprietary data sets. Why does all this matter? Well, as Sarah was referring, last year in the UK, advertisers invested £21 billion in advertising. Data underpins that investment. It's the basis for transactions between buyers of media campaigns and the sellers. It's also used to justify the choices made about that media investment, to appraise the effectiveness of the UK's advertising spend. However, an increasingly significant proportion of that spend is being determined by new proprietary data that is neither transparent nor accountable. And it's not just about advertising. Data drives vital programming and scheduling decisions. Meanwhile, the perceived values of the companies themselves, their share price or the success of their upcoming IPO is determined by the size of their audiences and their claimed effectiveness as advertising platforms. So data is the lifeblood of the industry for planning, trading, campaign evaluation, programming and investment in media owners and platforms themselves. Billions of pounds of advertising and media investment are at stake, and that's why we're here. Now, in a world before big data, there wasn't much debate about this, as the only reliable source of data was the joint industry currency. Largely that was because, in a pre-digital world, the cost of gathering data on analogue media usage was so prohibitively expensive that only by industries pooling their resources could they afford robust and reliable technology and the sample sizes needed to measure. It is being argued in some quarters now that in a world of connected data, the JIC model, the joint industry currency becomes irrelevant, bypassed by a combination of data feeds, automated trading and proprietary data sets. To the new media companies, the JICs are often seen as irrelevant, a hangover from a legacy media world. Meanwhile, the shared data approach can seem outdated to a fiercely competitive online world in which data is not usually something to be shared, but rather a weapon to be jealously guarded. However, the IPA and ISBA strongly believe that the JIC system remains relevant, if not more so in the current environment. A JIC collectively represents media owners, agencies and advertisers. It commissions and maintains a transparent system which is open for all to understand and use, a system that produces data that is trusted as a proven trading currency. Meanwhile, advertising budget holders can plan and trade based on one set of agreed figures. This helps to make an objective value judgment of different media options, whilst also removing the need to evaluate the relative merits of different data sets which can produce different results. A judgment on marketing effectiveness is easier when the inputs of media exposure are consistent. Multiple conflicting audience estimates spread confusion and limit understanding. A shared data currency provides clarity that delivers better insight into campaign effectiveness. Furthermore, and critically, the JICs measure what people are doing, so they can track individuals' media exposure over time. This is essential for evaluating reach and frequency across platforms and for the attribution of demographics to device data. After all, advertisers are buying people, not machines. A joint currency means that media owners can monitor their performance in the context of the market as a whole and know that when they're looking at their competitors, they're making valid comparisons. Now, I'd argue that the system has naturally evolved as the media industry has grown. The JIC model has created a platform of trust and confidence for advertisers that's helped those industries thrive. History shows that this is a natural direction of travel for a maturing medium. Confidence in the media sector grows as it adopts a shared data currency. So to summarise, the shared currency model should be seen as an advanced state of evolution for media owners. For the reasons I've outlined, this approach to accountable media data would have to be invented if it did not already exist. Yet the enthusiasm of IPA and ISBA for the JIC model should not be seen as a rejection of the opportunities offered by new sources of data, as Sarah was saying. Media companies now have proprietary data that's often collected at census level and in real time. It can be used to attract advertisers and demonstrate effect. However, the danger is that these data are portrayed not as estimates, but as the absolute truth, what actually happened, as opposed to an estimate of it. Accountability is not just about the level of detail being provided, it's about the accuracy of that data. And big data, and I know because I've worked with it for over a decade, can have as many issues as survey research data in terms of biases, limitations, and plain, simple errors. The research industry dealt with this issue by adopting an open and collaborative approach. People know how the data is derived, they're free to make suggestions on how to improve it, and the ingredients are printed on the side of the tin. In a similar way, these new data sets need to be transparent about the way in which data is collected and what it represents. So what does transparent mean? It doesn't mean giving away trade secrets or going naked in public. It doesn't mean surrendering your intellectual property. Put simply, it does mean three things. Firstly, transparency means consistent definitions in how a media contact is reported. The challenge with online media data is that they are often defined in a different way, even though the activities mirror offline media behaviour, such as viewing, listening and reading. An obvious inconsistency is the persistence level required for someone to be classified as a viewer or a reader. Online metrics are being compared with established offline metrics in an illogical way, with billions of hits to 3-minute videos being compared to average minute audience to 60-minute broadcasts. This is madness. But there's method in that madness if you do want to mislead advertisers. The second aspect of transparency is about methodologies, how the data is gathered. The JIC model means the methods used to gather and process the data are open to all. Technical document is available on all the JIC websites, and advertisers typically have representation on the committees that oversee the data collection and production. This benefits the advertisers, as they have reassurance that the data is fit for purpose, and it benefits the media owners, since openness and collaboration build trust. These underlying principles can and should be applied to proprietary data sets as well. The third components of transparency are standards and auditing. Whether proprietary data sets are being used as inputs into trading currencies, or as real-time data feeds into programmatic, or in automated trading systems, they need to be objectively audited and verified in a way that's similar to the process followed by the joint industry currencies. JICWebs, the Joint Industry Committee for Web Standards, has been established to set industry-agreed principles for good practice in online ad trading. Meanwhile, ABC delivers industry-agreed census metrics for media brands and audits that to provide associated certification for the media industry. Standards and auditing are two sides of the same coin. You set a standard and then you check people are reaching that standard. Standards are a feature of all walks of life, whether it's knowing that your chosen plumber is on the gas safe register, or more implicitly knowing that the Food Standards Agency has inspected the restaurant you're eating in. Standards minimise risk and make life easier. Someone has checked this, so you don't have to. Insisting the data you use for trading has been audited is no different. Using unaudited data won't blow up your house or give you food poisoning, but it could waste billions of pounds in advertising. To put simply, transparency means setting standards for clear and consistent definitions and then regular auditing to demonstrate that those standards are being met. In the absence of those standards, the online industry has been dogged since its inception with a series of unfortunate events that were initially obscured by the breathtaking opportunities that online has to offer. But in hindsight, it makes a sorry story. As online usage initially grew, there was a proliferation of measurement services, each collecting different sorts of data, variously web meters, cookies, or ISP. They often provided very different metrics and very different estimates. So media owners could pick and choose which metric gave them the best performance and run that to show that they were the best online newspaper in the UK or whatever. Gradually, under pressure from the data users, those services amended their approaches and the results started to converge. Often, though, the methodologies remained opaque and hidden behind a wall of intellectual property as the measurement services battled for market share and profitability. It then gradually became clear that millions of aggregated hits did not translate into actual separate people, and so the industry moved towards unique users, which inevitably produced lower, albeit more realistic, audience figures than the initial hype had indicated. This required very careful management with advertisers in particular. Then, as connected screens multiplied, it became apparent that one person could crop up as a different unique user on different devices. However, people buy products, not smartphones. Some estimate that there may already be more than twice as many unique users in the UK as there are people, even before we factor in Internet of Things connected devices. It also gradually became apparent that serving an advertisement did not necessarily translate into that ad actually being seen. Viewability fast became an issue. In parallel, concerns emerged as to the amount of web traffic actually conducted by humans. How much of the audience being claimed was either generated by bots or was actively being distorted by pixel stuffing and click fraud. And meanwhile, advertisers became increasingly concerned that automatic ad-serving systems were placing ads in contexts that were unsuitable, leading to the rise of content verification products that ensured that advertisers could block inappropriate ad placement. And then bringing things right up to date, more recently, major online platforms like Facebook and Google have had to repeatedly admit to basic errors in the audience figures they've been producing. Any misreporting, which is always overestimates, significantly underestimates trust. This is the danger inherent in marking one's own homework. I chart all these issues not as an attempt to attack or undermine current online audience measurement. The opportunities for advertisers in connected data are huge, and every innovation has false starts and then experiences growing pains. We certainly have not listed these issues in the accompanying report as we want to engage with the online industry, not slag it off. I've been through these problems to demonstrate that a more transparent approach to how data is being produced could have avoided each new blow to online's credibility. A more collaborative mindset could have helped to detect, anticipate and resolve issues at an earlier point, with less damage to advertisers' trust in the medium as a whole. Now, we're not naive. We know that there are barriers to overcome in terms of transparency, particularly for connected media. Online companies can view the principles of accountability as contrary to the commercial realities and cultural habits of the brave new connected world. The valuation of online companies, in most cases, takes significant account of their ability to generate revenues not now, but in the future. So platforms jealously guard their secret sauce behind a wall of intellectual property rights and litigation. There's a consequent tension between the openness required for full accountability and the transparency in the way in which JICs achieve this. Yet transparency does not require online platforms to reveal their secrets to their competitors. Data users can be reassured if independent experts, whether it's JICs or auditors, have checked the data sets on their behalf. The other challenge is that as data becomes ever more connected, expanding the ability to track individual media behaviour at a granular level, then consumer privacy issues naturally come into play. All media companies are rightly cautious when it comes to the release of data that might infringe user privacy. Online social media platforms are understandably particularly anxious about this. But how different are the privacy requirements of online businesses to traditional media? Other media platforms have taken significant steps to be able to deliver innovative advertising solutions and to be compliant with data protection and privacy legislation. For example, information about homes that subscribe to satellite telly is used for advanced ad targeting. This has been developed in a way that maintains a proprietary data set for trading, in parallel with the delivery of transparency through a JIC for planning purposes. These barriers can be overcome, and they have to be overcome, because we're at a dangerous point where the credibility of trading data is being questioned. We're witnessing a crisis of faith that's come to a head in the last few months. Famously, at the start of this year, Mark Pritchard of P&G gave a rallying cry to the industry in words that have been repeated endlessly in the trade press. But the bottom line is that by the end of 2017, P&G is committed to using only data that's been audited by an independent third party. Meanwhile, WPP's Sir Martin Sorrell has claimed that his clients are wary and suspicious now of online metrics. And online companies are suffering damage to their reputations and run the risk of losing the trust of advertisers in their ability to accurately report the contribution they make to effective marketing campaigns. Openness and comparability in the metrics used to measure consumer exposure is vital, particularly if the online companies aspire to move beyond revenue from last clicks to attract lucrative long-term brand-building advertising. Meanwhile, the JICs are increasingly moving to hybrid measurement systems that ingest online data. So it's also vital that the industry is reassured about the quality and the veracity of any proprietary data that's being absorbed into these industry-owned currencies. So without getting too Henry V about things, and any form of patriotism is dangerous in days like these, the time for action is here, and what the IPA and ISBA have published is a call to action. Perceptions of lack of transparency are in danger of undermining trust in the industry as a whole. The trading system cannot cope with alternative facts. It needs accountable media audience data. So how do we ensure a brighter future? Well, advertising budget holders should seek reassurance about the data being used to make their buying decisions. They should ask the following questions, regardless of whether data is from a shared industry currency or a data set that belongs to a media owner or online platform. And here it is, my only bullet point chart of the presentation. They need to be asking, who gathers the data? How is it gathered? How is it processed? What quality control is in place? What universe does it represent? How is media exposure actually defined? Do those definitions comply with agreed industry standards and guidelines? And has the data been independently audited? This doesn't mean data users have to become experts in such matters. A combination of the JIC system and independent auditing of proprietary data can provide the reassurance that those questions have indeed been answered. This is why the IPA and ISBA are calling on their members and the wider industry to adopt a 5-point plan. I told you it was a manifesto. Firstly, we want you to ensure that the audience data you use for trading is based on metrics and methods that comply with agreed open industry standards. We ask you to insist that those standards are upheld by independent auditing of counting standards and of measurement systems. As an industry, we have to hold proprietary data sets to the same level of accountability as industry-owned trading currencies. And we must continue to support the principles of the joint industry currency model as the best-in-class approach to providing objective and comparable audience data and metrics. We talked about kite marks earlier. Well, if you're unsure whether you are using data generated from or endorsed by a JIC, then just look for this handy kite mark. Finally, we must encourage all media owners and platforms to engage with the joint industry currencies, not to the exclusion of their own data sets, but to enhance their own credibility with advertisers. Now, I guess my biggest worry in working with the IPA and ISBA to prepare the report was basically whether this presentation was all about a statement of the bleeding obvious. Well, perhaps it is, but sometimes we do need to step back and remind ourselves about the basic facts, because it's all too easy to lose ourselves in the detail. And if it really was that obvious, then we would not be facing a crisis in media data. There are exciting opportunities in a vibrant and innovative media sector, but incitement about those new opportunities should not get in the way of accountability. The money at risk for advertisers is now at such a scale that transparency in audience data is a must-have, not just a desirable. Advertisers deserve to know that their media budgets are being allocated and evaluated based on media audience data they can have faith in. Data that's produced to the high-quality, industry-agreed standards they've become accustomed to. Perhaps that is obvious, but it does need saying. Thanks for your time. And I'm now going to hand over to Phil Smith of ISBA to round up. There's the clicker.
Thank you. Not needed.
If you need a clicker.
Richard, thank you very much indeed. And congratulations on a very clear and graphic presentation of the need for transparent and accountable media data, for your personal checklist of what to be doing. So as the image of Edward fades, hopefully, in our minds, let me introduce myself. I'm the relatively new Director General of ISBA. We are the voice of British advertisers, as it says on our logo, and we are here to represent the interests of our 165 members who are the biggest spenders in the UK. And we should reflect that we have really come full circle here, because ISBA was formed nearly 120 years ago to press for audited, verifiable newspaper circulation data. That's in the nature of the white paper itself, not to name names, although I think from the presentation that we've received this morning, it's pretty clear what it is that we're talking about today. However, ISBA has set itself the ambition to be clear about the changes that it wants to see happen in the world and what its members are looking for. So I would like to mention just a few specifics. First of all, I'd really like to applaud the work of PAMCO in developing AMP. It's multi-platform, cross-device audience measurement for news, no mean achievement, and it represents a very significant investment on the part of publishers. And for those who are tempted to see JICs as part of the old order, as Richard was saying, inflexible remnants perhaps that are losing relevance, this proves that that need not be so. And as ever increasing amounts of media consumption takes place digitally, individually and on demand, it's vital that our measurement systems and industry standards keep pace. We're encouraged by Project Dovetail, fusing television data across devices and platforms, and that again is no simple undertaking. However, advertisers do want to see more wide-ranging measurement of the online environment, especially video, in line with the principles described this morning, to create a definitive, joined-up view of media consumption, and I do mean YouTube and Facebook. We recognise that there are no plans currently to do this and that there are challenges. Those are challenges of scope. We recognise that there are challenges around the technology, around data privacy, challenges around the standards themselves. Organising to do this may in itself be a challenge. But as we can conclude from today, just because measurement is third party doesn't mean that it's adequate. However, the demand from ISBA's members is real. We're not satisfied that such a large and growing part of the media ecosystem is not independently audited to open, consistent industry standards. And we are looking for all parties to come to the table with a will to find solutions, and we're ready to play our part. So if today's white paper generates a serious, constructive discussion with that end in mind, it will have made all the hard work worthwhile. Thank you very much.